AlexGs Aquarium. Today we're going to be talking about fill testing on the 4,200 gallon aquarium. In today's video I'm going to be going over why fill testing on the 4,200 gallon aquarium build is so important, talk about the methodology that I am using for filling this aquarium, and then go through the fill test and the results on the 4,200 gallon aquarium. It's going to be a lot of fun. Let's get right into our first topic. Well, why fill test the 4,200 gallon aquarium? Well, there's a lot of reasons. Most obvious out there, of course, is you want to make sure that the aquarium holds water, which at this point the aquarium is still full. It has been holding water completely full for 5 weeks now. This test has some really good whys behind it. Not just the fact that I want the aquarium to hold water, but with a DIY custom build like this, it is incredibly important to not only make sure that you hold water, but that your structure is actually functioning the way that it should, and it is stable. And by that, I mean you don't want to see the aquarium bowing, leaning, water going out of level, problems with the floor. There's any number of things that I am monitoring on this structure. And by doing a fill test, it gives me the opportunity to see how this structure reacts as it's filled up. And this aquarium wasn't filled up in a day, and I'll talk about the method that I use for filling this aquarium, but I want everyone to understand there is over 30,000 pounds of water in this aquarium right now. So doing a fill test is really important for the structure. My original 700 gallon plywood aquarium that I built many years ago, along with a 480 gallon aquarium that was made out of plywood, were both fill tested. The 480 passed with flying colors. The 720 gallon aquarium, however, about a week into the fill test, I noticed that the aquarium sides were physically bowing outwards. The rear of the tank was bowing outwards, and I had to drain the tank down, get it below the halfway mark, so that the bowing kind of came back in. But that fill test was the opportunity for me to see that problem, and I caught it before I had a leak or a catastrophic failure of the tank. And more importantly, I hadn't put any fish or corals or anything in that tank. It was just filled with fresh water. So it was that opportunity to test the structure and make sure it was okay. In that case, it wasn't. I had to build a reinforcement bracing system. And then once that was done, I refilled the tank, tested it again, and it passed with flying colors, and it was in operation for over 3 years. And I tore it down, moved it to my new house here, and I actually still have that 700 gallon aquarium up and running with the same bracing system, a few modifications to the rest, but it just goes to show you how important this fill testing really is for an aquarium like this. It can make a difference. Now, beyond the structure, with this aquarium, there is one more factor that I am going to be watching, and that is humidity. This aquarium canopy will eventually be a fairly sealed structure with very controlled airflow. But now during the fill test, while I'm still completing all of the finishing woodworking of the canopy, the aquarium is not sealed off, and I wanted to see how much the humidity will change in this space with the aquarium in this state. And it's going to be for a limited time, and I'm very closely watching the humidity levels in the house, so I know what the evaporation rates are. So if things got out of control, I could stop the test, or cover the whole tank up with plastic real quick to just stop the moisture from getting in the room. Overall, it's important to understand that your aquarium holds water, the structure is acting as it should, and then finally, understanding humidity. That is the important parts for me. And I will recommend anybody that has an aquarium, whether it's a DIY aquarium or a store-bought aquarium, stand, whatever you have, you should always do some type of fill testing to make sure that everything is okay before you get to the point of putting fish or corals or any animals in it. Because the last thing you want to do is set something up, be really happy about it, have a problem, and then find out that you've just put those animals at risk. So that is the reason why I am doing the fill test for this aquarium. The next thing I want to talk about is method around fill testing an aquarium like this. And really, the first thing I gotta put out here with fill testing is it's gonna take time and you gotta be patient. At the time of filming this video, I have been fill testing this aquarium for 7 weeks. That's a long time. It's a lot of patience involved with this. And I know a lot of folks out there that are going to get a new aquarium, the last thing you want to do is be like, I don't want to wait 7 weeks. And depending on your size tank and your build or whatever you have, you can adjust the time. For me, I actually went longer on it because I did not have the supplies I needed to move on to the next step. So I just lengthened the fill test because it couldn't hurt anything. It just gave me more confidence in the structure and the aquarium holding water and my humidity in the basement. Now, my method for filling aquariums like this generally goes in the rule of quarters or thirds. I'm either filling in thirds of the tank or quarters of the tank. And I did a bit of a combination with the 4,200 gallon aquarium. First, I started filling the tank up to 10 inches. And when you fill the tank up to its first line and put a piece of blue painter's tape across it, you don't put any bubblers or power heads or any water movement in the tank. You want it stagnant, and you're going to sit there and watch it for a couple of days and make sure the water level doesn't drop, because that's an indicator of a leak. At the same time, you're going to be inspecting all your seals, inspecting the structure, inspecting for leaks coming out of other parts of the aquarium. So really important to do that. And once you have gone a couple days or however long you need to test that for, you raise the water level to the next height, which in my case was around the 50% mark. Then again, do the same inspections, watch everything. From there, you keep raising it up, and every time doing inspections and checks. Eventually, I got my plumbing fill tested, my return lines fill tested and running with a pump and a temporary sump. So along the whole way, you're constantly monitoring for leaks, you're watching the structure to make sure that there's no problems in it, and then even once you have gotten it completely filled, don't get complacent. Make sure you keep doing those checks and constantly just get into a routine for a while of doing it every day, monitoring things, making sure nothing looks off. And this is the time where if you see something wrong, you'll really want to take your action then to prevent a catastrophic leak or a structural failure. Now, filling this tank slowly also has the benefit of slowly adding weight onto the structure. Dumping 30,000 pounds of water on this floor in one day is a bad idea. And the best way that I can portray this is with a little experiment. When it comes to adding water onto an aquarium, adding a really high volume quickly adds a lot of weight to the floor, and you don't want to just put all that weight on the floor all at once, as I said. You want to gradually do it. A good example, and this is a little exaggerated, but I think it's a good reminder of it. If I take this rock and I gently set it on the styrofoam in this bucket, it'll hold the weight, no problem. Now, the styrofoam has a little bit of a bend in it, and really any structure that you are adding a significant amount of weight to is going to have some form of movement in it. It might be very, very minute. In this case for the aquarium, I don't expect it to be anything that could even be visibly seen, but understand that any time that you have a massive amount of weight going onto a structure, there is going to be a load put on it. And it might not even look like it's bending, and it might be something that is measured in micrometers, that you never even see it. But a good way to portray this is with this rock and the styrofoam, because this is an exaggerated experiment, but if you were to take the rock, put it on gently, holds no problem. Take the rock, drop it, I just broke the floor. And this is exactly what I'm talking about when it comes to filling your aquarium in stages over time. Water is heavy, 7 pounds per gallon for fresh water, roughly 8 pounds per gallon for salt water, and with this amount of weight on the floor, you don't want to put it all on at once. Is this likely to happen with this aquarium? No, it's not, but the idea is that you fill it in stages and slowly add that weight load to the floor, the aquarium stand, and also you're slowly adding the pressure onto the glass and the structure itself. So a very important step here is to take your time and fill the tank slowly. When it comes to the 4,200 gallon aquarium itself and the actual fill test, there was a bit of preparation work that needed to be done, and then I was able to go ahead and start the fill test. Now for preparation work here, I did a thorough cleaning inside the aquarium, just sweeping, vacuuming, getting sawdust out, little bits of construction debris from all my work in here, just because I didn't want anything to be in there when the tank's filled and, you know, potentially get clogged in a filter when I pump the tank out. So just making it nice and clean in there before I get going. Gave the glass a light wipe down inside as well. Nothing too significant though, very easy. The second step of my preparation work for this aquarium, however, was a little bit more involved, and it had to do with the threaded rod cross braces for this aquarium. For this aquarium, the threaded rod cross braces are a critical structural component that hold the top of the tank nice and square. They don't allow the water pressure to push outward on the tank, allowing it to bow. So for this aquarium, before I started filling, I took some pink contractor string and just taped it on here and just put a little bit of tension on these strings. The idea behind this was, as I start to fill this tank, I will be able to observe if there's any outward bowing. And also, the other piece of this is probably more important and critical here, is that when I go to tension these threaded rod cross braces down, I want to ensure that I'm not over tensioning them and pinching the tank sides together, as that could lead to overstressing the glass. So really important here to have this in as a little bit of a marker here for me to just see if the tank is trying to bow or be pinched inward. Now all the threaded rod cross braces before filling started were just hand tightened, and when the aquarium is getting closer to that 3/4 fill mark, I'll go ahead and give them a tensioning, which is going to be less than a full turn on here. It's just enough to get the rod tensioned up and not move the sides of the tank. Now when it comes to filling this aquarium, I elected to just use tap water. In past aquariums that I've built, I have used RODI water, and then once I got the RODI in here and the fill test was complete, I could just mix salt into the tank and make it salt water. However, with this aquarium being so large and not having an aquascape done, and really not wanting to risk having to dump RO water if I had a problem, and then also the issue of I have a very small RODI unit right now. It's only rated for about 200 gallons per day, so it would literally take like a month to fill this whole tank. So I elected to just use tap water and make this simple for the fill testing portion. Now I went ahead, got a piece of blue tape, put it on the side of the tank, turn the hose on, and let it start filling. For this portion, you just simply are observing constantly. I'm crawling around looking underneath the tank and checking all the glass seals as the water rises above the glass line. And as soon as that happened, where the water got that high, I was also checking level across the whole tank to make sure that the water line was as level as possible as across the whole tank, which I was really excited to see. It was dead on. And for being over such a wide area here, length and width in this shape, it's just really exciting to see the water was perfectly level all the way across. So really happy about that. Now as the water filling continued, I got it up to the 10 inches. I turned the hose off, readjusted my blue painter's tape line to where it was perfectly on there, and just watched. Let it sit for a few days. I didn't see any movement of the water. I didn't see any problems here. I said the test is good to keep going. Now I did use my utility sink faucet from my fish room, which is a much smaller diameter water line than my hose for outside. So I only filled a few inches at a time over the next week or so, And I stopped filling the water about halfway because my overflow holes in the side of the tank there had no plumbing attached to them. And at this point, the aquarium sat for a whole week while I got the plumbing for the drain and the return line finished. And I also plumbed in a temporary sump for that plumbing. At the same time, I also plumbed in all of the fittings to where I can attach my permanent plumbing to this system. When I have to, I can attach it into the running system in the fish room. As the plumbing got completed, I fill tested the plumbing. I have 4-inch drains. It's a lot of water in those, so I fill tested that along with the sump for a couple of days. Then I went ahead and just filled up the tank till it was just about to overflow into the bulkheads for the overflow. No plumbing on them at this point. I use this as a good test to test all my drain line plumbing and also calibrate the height of my sump and check my return line plumbing for leaks. So I got the tank running that way, let it run for a day or two. Then I added 90-degree elbows onto the overflow, raised the water up in the system a bit more. Always making sure to shut off that return pump when filling, because you don't want to lose sight of where your sump height is. Especially with this tank, calibrating the return pump to the overflow was critical. I've only got my Abyss 400 at about 40%, and the reason that I have it at that percentage is really because I will suck the sump tank dry if I turn it up anymore. And if I raise the water too high for overflow here, it might cause the sump to actually overflow when I turn the pump off. So there was a balancing act there. And give you an idea, 1 inch of this display tank is roughly 130 gallons of water. The sump I have on this tank holds 120 gallons of water, and it's already partially filled to keep that return pump running. So wanted to just make sure I don't overdo it on the overflow for this. So really important here to keep an eye on it. Once I had that overflow running, I put elbows on it, let the water come up more. I was getting close to the 3/4 full mark at this point. So I went ahead and used a ratchet to just tension all the threaded rods. None of them even received a full turn, and they had enough tension on them to hold the side of the tank. Again, constantly inspecting and watching those pink contractor strings over each one of those cross braces to make sure it's not sagging from an over tension and it's not pulling apart too much to show that the tank is bowing outward. And I also would look long ways down the tank of all the 12, 24, and 30-foot beams to keep an eye on that. Really important there. Once the tank was full though, at this point it was just going through, inspecting things, and checking for leaks on the seals, on the plumbing, everything. Now, as far as results go, when the tank was full, I did have 2 leaks. Now, the first leak was on a plug for a bulkhead on the 120-gallon sump, and it was dripping about 5 to 10 drops a day. I put another plug in there and I got it down to about 3 drops a day. I know what the fix is. I've got to pull the bulkhead and redo the fitting, but I didn't want to have to drain the sump and everything, so I just let it drip 3 drops a day. No big deal. The second leak though was on the first bulkhead of the overflow. When the tank got completely full, it started dripping water every few seconds, and it was likely just due to the water pressure was finally on that bulkhead, and it just found a little spot to get through. And luckily I was just able to take that bulkhead locking nut and just turn it over about 1/10 of a turn. It moved just by hand, no tools, and the leak stopped. And that's all the leaks I had with this plumbing. So from there on out, this tank has been full for 5 weeks at this point. I'm satisfied the fill test is completed, and I am ready to go ahead and drain this tank for the next steps. But before I do that, there's one other thing. So the tank's been full for 5 weeks. However, there was another reason why I did this fill test, and it was humidity control to understand where the humidity levels were in this house with this massive tank filled up. Knowing this canopy is not sealed up in its final form, but it still was a good control test here to see how high does the humidity really get down here if the water's not heated but running open in this basement. Surprisingly, it didn't get as bad as I thought it would. And I'll be honest, I really thought I was going to have to get plastic sheeting out, cover the top of the tank to stop evaporation from happening here, but leaving it at room temperature, not having a lot of surface agitation, minimized the evaporation on the system. And I was evaporating, when I started the tank full, about 5 gallons of water a day. Not a lot for something this big, but still a fair amount of water. Now, I figured that my sump tank was probably the main cause of that, so I did go ahead, put a polycarbonate cover over most of it, and actually cut my evaporation in half, so I'm down to about 2.5 gallons of evaporation a day. I do have ventilation on the tank. Originally it was ducting outside. I didn't really see a huge difference though, because the humidity down here was normally running in this part of the basement around 50 to 55% on its own. Now, the fish room is set to 45%. It's usually running in that 45 to 50 range. When this aquarium came online, the humidity where I'm at right now rose up to right around the high 50s to low 60s in the percentage, which is getting into the high level, higher than I'd normally like it to be. Not a big deal, because at this point there's no sealing on this canopy to keep the moisture in, but I wanted to see how does this work. So I've been monitoring it. The humidity levels have stayed stable. As a matter of fact, they go down quite a bit too, and my evaporation rate has not really changed. We've had some really humid days here in Chicagoland, and you know, the whole house was a little more humid, but overall my evaporation rate has not been much more than I normally have on any given day. And I did take my inline vent fan for this aquarium canopy and I ducted it through a 4-inch duct that goes all the way to the dehumidifier in the fish room. And I opened up the fish room door, which caused a bit of an air circulation, which is exactly where I want this to eventually go. That actually helped lower the humidity. Matter of fact, right now it's at 58% here. So it's really not much higher than it normally was considering this. Now, when this water is heated up to 78 degrees, I get all the water pumps in here and lots of surface agitation going. The humidity down here would get crazy high, way beyond what it should be if the canopy was still open. But understand, this canopy is going to be completely sealed and have a negative air pressure applied to it, just like my last home aquarium system that was 1,600 gallons. And that is going to force air to be pulled through the canopy and not allow the moisture to just creep out into the room. So really important part of this build. But humidity control here, looks like I'm in good shape now. I'm really looking forward to testing the humidity controls in here once the tank has a sealed canopy and I'm ready to refill this tank for it to go online. So a lot of exciting stuff going on here. That's the video for today, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. You got comments or questions, go ahead, leave them down below. Happy to share any information I can on this. Also, check me out on the Reef Beef Discord. I'm fairly active there in the members section. And of course, if you want to see more, go ahead, hit that subscribe button. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and I'll see you on the next video.